Disney built its name on family entertainment, bright songs, and happy endings. But hidden inside those animated classics are villain deaths that felt far darker than most kids were ready for. These were not simple off-screen exits or harmless falls. Some villains were crushed, burned, dragged into shadows, or sent falling to their deaths in scenes that stayed in viewers' minds for years. What made them so haunting was not just the death itself. It was the way Disney showed it. The music, the lighting, the screams, the fear, and the silence after. These moments were carefully animated to feel big, final, and terrifying. Today, we are counting down the most gruesome Disney villain deaths that shocked an entire generation and still feel disturbing decades later. Number 7. Charles Muntz from Up. His death might seem tame compared to others on this list, but there's something uniquely devastating about watching an elderly man plummet from the clouds to a silent, unseen impact. The scene takes place high above the South American wilderness as Muntz battles Carl Fredricksen among the floating balloons of Paradise Falls. What makes this death particularly brutal is the complete helplessness of it. Muntz doesn't die in a traditional moment of poetic justice. After wildly swinging a sword at a child and a bird, his foot catches on a few stray balloon lines, and he simply falls. The camera holds on the image of his tiny figure disappearing into the cloud layer below, while Carl's house balloon floats peacefully upward. Pixar's animation team spent months perfecting the physics of this fall, wanting the audience to feel the genuine weight of gravity, the real distance between the clouds and the ground far below. In early storyboards, Muntz's death was much more dramatic, involving elaborate action sequences. But director Pete Docter made the deliberate choice to strip away the spectacle and focus on the quiet horror of watching someone simply drop out of existence. The psychological impact on young viewers comes from the matter-of-fact nature of the death. There's no cartoon physics here, no chance for last-minute saves or miraculous survivals. Muntz falls because that's what happens when you lose your grip at 10,000 feet. It's a level of realism that catches children completely off guard in what they expected to be a light-hearted adventure film. Number 6. Syndrome from The Incredibles. Buddy Pine's transformation into the megalomaniacal syndrome culminates in one of the most graphic deaths in Pixar's catalog. After his defeat by the Parr family, Syndrome attempts to escape in his private jet, but his dramatic cape becomes caught in the aircraft's turbine engine. What follows is Pixar showing exactly what happens when a human body meets industrial machinery. The cape pulls Syndrome backward into the spinning blades as he screams in terror, realizing too late that his theatrical costume has become his death trap. The jet engine doesn't simply make him disappear or cut to black at the moment of impact. Instead, the animation shows the cape being shredded, Syndrome's body being pulled inexorably toward the spinning metal, and the final moment when he vanishes into the resulting explosion. The Pixar animation team referenced actual industrial mechanics when designing this sequence. The goal was to create something that felt mechanically accurate, not cartoonishly exaggerated. Director Brad Bird defended the graphic nature of Syndrome's death in interviews, explaining that it served as a direct consequence of the character's vanity and theatrical ego. The cape that made Syndrome feel powerful and dramatic ultimately becomes his executioner. It's a death that teaches children about cause and effect in the most visceral way possible, showing that actions have real, irreversible consequences. The scene also pays homage to Edna Mode's earlier warning about the dangers of capes in superhero costumes. When Edna shows Helen the historical footage of heroes who died because of their capes, it sets up Syndrome's death as inevitable poetic justice. But for young viewers, seeing that justice carried out in such mechanical detail creates a lasting association between pride, vanity, and violent death. Number 5. Ursula from The Little Mermaid. The sea witch's death represents one of Disney's most explicitly violent villain demises, featuring a massive harpoon-like ship's bow piercing directly through her abdomen. After Ursula transforms into a gigantic sea monster during the film's climax, Prince Eric commandeers a shipwreck and drives it straight into her body. The animation shows the wooden ship's pointed bow penetrating Ursula's flesh in graphic detail. Her tentacles thrash wildly as the massive projectile runs her through, and her death scream echoes across the ocean as she is struck by mystical lightning and dragged dead to the bottom of the sea. For a film marketed to young children, the visual of a character being impaled by what amounts to a wooden spear is remarkably brutal. Disney's animation team drew inspiration from classic naval warfare and whaling imagery when designing this death sequence. They studied illustrations of ships ramming sea creatures to create something that felt mythologically powerful while remaining within the bounds of a family rating. What makes Ursula's death particularly disturbing is how personal and direct it feels. Unlike deaths caused by falling or environmental hazards, Eric deliberately drives a weapon into her body. It's an act of calculated violence, not an accident or misfortune. The animation emphasizes Eric's determination as he grips the ship's wheel, steering directly toward Ursula's massive form. The sequence also contains layers of symbolic violence that operate on multiple levels. Ursula, who represents raw, unchecked power, is physically pierced and destroyed by the male hero. For adult viewers analyzing the film years later, the sheer physical brutality of the death scene adds an additional layer of disturbing subtext to what children experience as straightforward action. Number 4. Mufasa from The Lion King. While technically not a villain, Mufasa's death deserves inclusion because of how explicitly Disney chose to animate his murder. The wildebeest stampede sequence remains one of the most traumatic moments in animation history, not because of what it suggests might happen, but because of what it shows actually happening. The scene begins with Mufasa fighting through the stampede to reach young Simba, showcasing the king's strength and determination as he battles against hundreds of panicking animals. But when Mufasa finally reaches the cliff face and begins to climb to safety, Scar's betrayal transforms the sequence from rescue to execution. Disney's animators spent over 2 years perfecting the stampede sequence, studying actual footage of animal migrations and consulting with wildlife experts. They wanted every detail of Mufasa's struggle to feel authentic and physically accurate. The most disturbing element is how the animation lingers on Mufasa's fall after Scar throws him back into the stampede. Rather than cutting away quickly, the camera follows Mufasa's fall as he disappears into the chaotic, dusty rush of the herd. The sound design amplifies the terror, creating an audio landscape that makes the violence feel tactile and real. In original concepts, Mufasa's death occurred mostly off-screen, with only the aftermath shown to young Simba. But directors Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff made the deliberate choice to show the actual moment of betrayal and the fatal plunge, believing that cutting away would lessen the emotional impact on both Simba and the audience. They wanted children to experience the full weight of loss, the complete finality of death. The sequence also employs sophisticated animation techniques to maximize emotional impact. As Mufasa reaches towards Scar's paw, the camera angle places viewers in Simba's perspective, watching his father plead for help. When Scar's claws extend and pierce Mufasa's paws before throwing him backward, the animation shows the physical pain in Mufasa's expression, the moment of realization that his brother intends to kill him. Number 3. Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. Belle's narcissistic suitor meets his end with a fall from Beast's castle, but it's a tiny animation detail that transforms his death from simple gravity into something far more sinister. As Gaston plummets from the tower toward the rocky ground below, Disney's animators inserted a single frame that most viewers never consciously notice but that registers subconsciously with disturbing clarity. In that split second, tiny skulls flash in Gaston's pupils, reflecting his inner evil at the moment of death. It's a technique borrowed from horror films, where supernatural elements appear for just long enough to create unease without allowing viewers to fully process what they've seen. The skull imagery transforms Gaston's death from an accident into a supernatural judgment, suggesting that his fall reveals his true evil nature. The animation team wanted to suggest that Gaston's death wasn't just physical but metaphysical, that his soul was as ugly as his actions had been throughout the film. They experimented with different symbols before settling on skulls, ensuring it created the desired psychological impact without being so obvious as to disrupt the story flow. What makes this death particularly sophisticated is how it operates on multiple levels of perception. Children watching the film consciously register Gaston falling and assume he dies from the impact. But the skull imagery creates a deeper layer of psychological disturbance, suggesting that evil people face supernatural consequences for their actions. It's a moral lesson delivered through horror movie techniques. The choice to include this supernatural element also connects to the film's themes about inner beauty versus outward appearance. Throughout Beauty and the Beast, characters are judged by their true nature rather than their superficial qualities. Gaston's death, complete with the skull imagery, represents the final revelation of his inner ugliness made visible. Number 2. Clayton from Tarzan. The ivory hunting villain meets his end in what may be Disney's most explicitly graphic death scene, featuring a hanging that the animation team chose to show in uncompromising detail. After being entangled in jungle vines during his final battle with Tarzan, Clayton pulls out a machete and frantically cuts at the vegetation around him, unaware that he's severing the very vines that are supporting his weight. What follows is Disney's most realistic depiction of death by hanging. As Clayton falls, the vines around his neck snap taut, jerking his body to a violent stop. But rather than obscuring the moment entirely with shadows, Disney's animators use a sudden lightning flash to illuminate the unmistakable silhouette of Clayton's hanging corpse against the jungle canopy. ensuring that viewers understand exactly what has happened. The lightning effect was a deliberate choice by the directors, who used silhouette to sear the grim image into viewers' minds. The flash reveals the shadow of Clayton's body swaying from the vines, his neck bent at an unnatural angle, hanging lifeless. It's an effect borrowed directly from horror cinematography, designed to maximize psychological impact. Disney's animation team wanted Clayton's death to carry real grounded weight, not a cartoon approximation. The shadow cast against the trees, the angle of his head, the way his body hangs limp, all these details were designed to be grimly realistic. The most disturbing aspect of Clayton's death is how it subverts viewer expectations. Throughout the sequence, audiences assume they're watching a standard Disney villain defeat, where the bad guy gets his comeuppance through cartoon physics. But when the vines snap tight, and the lightning reveals the silhouette of Clayton's lifeless body, viewers realize they've just witnessed an actual execution. The decision to show this death so explicitly was controversial even within Disney's animation team. Some animators argued that the hanging was too graphic for a family film, while others defended it as necessary to show the real consequences of Clayton's greed and violence. The directors ultimately made the choice to include the disturbing details, believing that cutting away would undermine the moral weight of the story. Number 1. Judge Claude Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Disney's most sinister villain meets the most explicitly violent death in the studio's animated canon, falling into molten metal right after screaming biblical verses about divine punishment. It's a death scene that belongs more in a horror film than a family movie, complete with hellfire imagery and religious terror. The sequence takes place atop Notre Dame Cathedral as Frollo pursues Quasimodo and Esmeralda with murderous intent. Raising his sword for the killing blow, Frollo screams, "And he shall smite the wicked and plunge them into the fiery pit." But as he delivers the biblical quote, the stone gargoyle he's standing on begins to crack and crumble. The gargoyle's face transforms into a demonic visage, its eyes glowing with supernatural fire as it breaks away from the cathedral wall. What makes Frollo's death so uniquely terrifying is how the animation presents it as immediate divine judgment. He plummets into the molten copper below, experiencing exactly the punishment he spent the film inflicting on others. It's a direct quote from biblical descriptions of hell, spoken by a character who realizes too late he is the wicked one. Disney's animation team drew inspiration from medieval depictions of hell and damnation when designing this death sequence. They studied religious artwork showing the punishment of sinners and examined illustrations from Dante's Inferno. The goal was to create imagery that would feel genuinely supernatural and biblically authentic. The hellfire visual effects surrounding Frollo's fall represent some of Disney's most sophisticated animation work. The flames don't behave like normal fire but writhe and twist with supernatural intelligence, reaching toward Frollo as if eager to claim him. The molten metal below glows with otherworldly intensity, suggesting temperatures that could not exist in the natural world. What makes this death particularly disturbing for children is how it validates every religious fear about sin and punishment. Throughout the film, Frollo has used religious authority to justify his cruel actions, claiming divine sanction for his persecution. His death scene suggests that a higher power has been watching and judging, waiting for the perfect moment to exact supernatural revenge. The production team at Disney knew they were pushing boundaries with Frollo's death. The film already contained more mature themes than typical Disney fare, dealing with religious persecution, lust, and moral corruption. But directors Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise believed that Frollo's evil demanded an equally dramatic punishment. The choice to have Frollo quote scripture right before falling to his death adds layers of theological complexity that most children's films avoid entirely. It suggests that Frollo inadvertently predicted his own divine justice. For young viewers, the scene confirms abstract lessons about sin and punishment with a visual intensity that makes them terrifyingly concrete. The gargoyle's transformation from stone to demon represents another layer of supernatural horror. Throughout the film, the cathedral's gargoyles serve as Quasimodo's friends and companions, representing the boundary between sacred and secular. But when the gargoyle supporting Frollo transforms into a demon, it suggests that the building itself has turned against the corrupt judge, that even the stones of Notre Dame reject his presence. These 7 deaths represent more than just creative choices by Disney's animation teams. They reveal a studio willing to confront children with genuine mortality, real consequences, and the visual reality of death. Unlike modern animated films that tend to soften or obscure violence, these classics show death in explicit detail, forcing young viewers to grapple with concepts of mortality, justice, and moral consequence. The psychological impact of these scenes extends far beyond their immediate shock value. By showing death as final, violent, and sometimes supernaturally justified, Disney created a generation of viewers who understood that actions have irreversible consequences. These weren't cartoon deaths that could be undone with magical reset buttons or sequels that brought villains back to life. These were permanent endings that taught children about the weight of moral choices. But this raises an uncomfortable question that parents and film critics have debated for decades. Did Disney's willingness to show genuine consequence, death that looks like death, make generations of children more emotionally intelligent and morally aware? Or were these simply scary movies disguised as family entertainment, traumatizing young minds under the banner of wholesome values? The answer might lie in how these scenes function within their larger stories. Each death serves a specific moral purpose, showing viewers that evil actions lead to evil consequences. Frollo's religious hypocrisy earns him supernatural punishment. Clayton's greed and violence result in accidental execution. Gaston's narcissism leads to his literal downfall. These aren't random acts of violence, but carefully constructed moral lessons delivered through visceral imagery. Perhaps what made these deaths so effective and so traumatic was precisely their refusal to look away from difficult truths. In an era when children's entertainment increasingly shields young viewers from any hint of genuine consequence or moral complexity, these Disney classics stand as reminders of what animation could accomplish when it treated its audience as capable of confronting genuine emotional and moral challenges. These deaths traumatized an entire generation not because they were gratuitously violent, but because they were emotionally honest. They showed children that evil has consequences, that choices matter, and that death is real and final. Whether that honesty was beneficial or harmful remains a question each viewer must answer for themselves, but there's no denying the lasting impact these scenes had on millions of young minds. The legacy of these gruesome Disney deaths continues to influence animation today, though modern studios have largely moved away from such explicit imagery. Contemporary animated films tend to favor redemption arcs over permanent punishment, teaching children that everyone deserves second chances rather than showing the final consequences of evil choices. Whether this represents progress or a loss of moral clarity depends on your perspective, but it's undeniable that something fundamental has changed in how we present morality to children through animation.